When I started following Christ, I found out everything I needed was right there. That emptiness that I had for so many years, it was being filled. And I was like, well, maybe this is what I was searching for this whole time.
Well, hey, want to welcome you guys to another episode of the podcast, Rebuilding Life After Addiction. My name is Justin Franich, and I'm here with Ashley Marner. And man, we're excited to sit down and have a conversation today. Real quick, before we get into our conversation, if this is your first time here, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button. You can learn more about Shenandoah Valley Adult Teen Challenge on the internet, on any of our social media feeds. All of the links are down below in the description. And man, we're excited. Ashley, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great.
Sorry, I asked you how you were doing right as you went to pick up your coffee.
So, that's cool.
No, man, but thanks for sitting down to chat. And I just wanted to, we'll just sit down and talk about your story, talk about your testimony a little bit. And so you just want to introduce yourself, and then we'll roll from there.
I'm Ashley Marner. I'm from the Outer Banks, North Carolina. I'm 36 years old. And I'm here at Shenandoah. No, I'm 35. Wait 35, a second. Okay. Yeah. I'm at Shenandoah Valley.
You don't even know how old you are.
I know. That's crazy. At the Shenandoah Valley Teen Challenge. And you just jump right into the story?
Yeah, man. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, did you, obviously you're here, and we're both here because we've had, our stories. We've had history with addiction and whatnot. And so tell us a little bit about your story, maybe how you came up and how you ended up getting into drugs and whatnot when you did.
So growing up, I had like a normal childhood. When I say normal, I had 4 brothers and 2 sisters, and I also had 2 adopted brothers. My dad was the chairman deacon of the church, and both of my mom and my dad, they had to work a lot because they had to support all of us. But every time the church was open, my dad had us in there. And as a kid, he was like, why are we in church so much? I guess I started building like a resentment towards church because I was in there so much. But I remember the stories growing up, and it actually just came back to me now, started coming back to me, some of the stories I was hearing. I was like, wow, this is more than a story, like Noah and Moses parting the Red Sea. But as I got older, I started to walk away from the church. When I became a teenager, I had the decision where I can go to church or I can not go to church. So I started staying home from church.
So your parents gave you the option?
They did. Okay. They did. Nice. Yeah. And another big thing is that I wasn't getting the attention from home because my parents worked all the time to support us. Yeah. And so I kind of turned to the streets. It was the wrong kind of love, but it was, at least I was feeling some kind of love.
Just out of curiosity, the church that you were attending growing up, I mean, there are different types of churches, right? And so some churches are very, grace-driven. Some churches are they follow the letter of the law.
Yeah.
What was your experience?
Man, my church it was basically, this is how I felt. It's anything that I do, I'm going to hell. Right. I was I told my dad one time, I was I don't even know why I'm even going to church. I'm going to hell anyway. And that's the way the preacher, that's the way he preached it. Was Salem Missionary Baptist Church. Yeah. And it was a lot of, fire and brimstone.
Almost felt like they cut the heat up prior so that you would sweat while they were preaching, right? It's a good strategy.
And it just turned me away from church for a little while because I was like, man, I didn't think there was nothing I could do.
So would it be like those feelings of the overly judgmental, almost feeling the law, feeling like you never measured up, you were never good enough?
Yes, it felt like that all the time.
So you mentioned that you started to run to the streets after that. So was that where, was that some of what you were searching for? You were looking for somewhere where you did connect, where you were trying to, or what was the motivation there, pulling away from the church and kind of playing around in the streets?
Well, I think it was more so I was doing what I wanted to do. Okay. And I didn't have to do what nobody was telling me to do. But I really felt like I just wanted to be liked. Okay. I wanted that attention. I wanted to feel like I belonged somewhere. And of course, they accepted me for a season. And then it led me right back. It led me to addiction where I was actually, I turned into a drug dealer.
Okay.
And then I started watching all my friends go to jail. I remember walking home from school one day, and we were walking to the little place where we went to go sell drugs at. And I remember I was walking beside my friend, and the cops, the feds, like 50 feds just came, surrounded us, and they picked him up, left me there. Wow. And like we were best friends. I was probably 15 then, okay. Wow. 15. Yeah. And I remember him getting 3 years. First time he ever been in trouble, and he got 3 years in federal penitentiary.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was he holding? He had a lot of weight on him?
Well, he didn't have anything. We just literally got out of school. Wow. But it was an indictment from where I guess he had served drugs to an undercover. Yeah. And so he's been under surveillance for a while, and after that I just turned away from the streets. I was like, I'm not going to jail. Right. I'm not doing that.
So 15, you have this experience that kind of almost scares you straight for a little bit, right?
Yep.
And then, you fell back in later on. So what did that process look like? I mean, did you make it to the rest of high school, living okay, sober, and?
Well, that's kind of, I was with the whole selling drugs thing. I was smoking weed. I was walking to school, thought it was cool. Right. Just to smoke before I went to school, and just to have that aroma, which is weird. Right. But it seems cool when you're walking in school. And but my older brother, I started hanging out with him and his friends, and they drank, and I think they did a little cocaine. And so I went from selling drugs to hanging out with them, and like the more you're around it, the more tempting it is. Mm. And like, it's not something that I wanted to do, but it's almost like fitting in again.
Yeah, what do you think it is that caused that? Because I know most people, not everybody, I don't want to paint everybody with a broad brush. Most people I talk to, they kind of start out, and like I've not met many people that just started out mainline heroin addicts.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I'm saying? Like that's not the first thing you do when you're using.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people talk about pot, whether it's a gateway drug or whatever, but like, there's this progression, whether it starts with pot or anything else. And so for you, like, what do you think it was that allowed you to progress, from just, I enjoy the high of smoking weed, kind of the bad boy attitude, you know what I'm saying? Because like, you see that smell coming into school, people know you've been smoking pot.
Right,
It grabs the attention of people.
It does.
But then to hanging out with friends and cocaine and all that progression, how did that take place for you?
Well, actually, for me, I feel like it was just who I was around and what was going on at the time. Because before, everybody was smoking weed around me. Yeah. And so, hey, eventually I'm going to try it. And then everybody else they were doing cocaine. Mm. And I was like, well, it took me a little bit longer to do that versus smoking weed. Yeah. Because, like, growing up, cocaine wasn't really upset. It was like you're a cokehead. Right. Like that's almost bad. Yeah. Well, it is bad. But for me, I think it was just to fit in. Okay. And then from fitting in, I started to enjoy it.
So let me ask you a question there. Like somebody's using pot now, mm-hmm. right? It's legal most places now, right. So it's really not a big deal for most folks.
Yeah.
And most of us don't recognize the progression.
Yeah.
From one thing to another when we're trapped in the middle of it.
Yep.
It's just kind of part for the course. Have you ever thought about it retrospectively, like what you could have done differently to maybe stop the progression?
I think, honestly, if I would have just stayed in church and listened to my parents, right. I think I would have been...
Nobody wants that advice, though. Nobody's ready for that preaching.
No, it's right. Almost like when your parents tell you that the stove is hot and you still touch it anyway. You got to find out for yourself.
What do you think it takes for somebody to get from that point? We're so self-reliant.
Yep.
We're so prideful. Like, learning by experience is fine. Yeah. But there are moments where if we just listen to people, we don't have to learn by experience. Right. Like, what do you think it is inside somebody that, like, causes us in those moments to really push people away? You know what I'm saying? And just like, I've got to touch the stove. You know?
I mean, I really think it's almost like a sense of pride, and you don't want to be told what to do. It's almost like submitting. Right, like another grown man doesn't want to submit to another grown man.
Yeah.
But if you just look at it, I mean, like God placed this in your life, it changes everything.
Yeah.
But
it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. I mean, just like the learning, the experiential nature of things, but then trying to be, I don't know, as I've matured in life, like I try to put myself in the room with people who are further along than where I am now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to, like, if you've been through it
Right.
and you can tell me a shortcut, like, I want to learn,
Right.
you know, and in the middle of our addiction, we're not really ready to hear anything from anybody.
No.
But like, that's why I ask some of these questions, and I don't mind going into, you know, the nitty gritty of, you know, the progression and all that, because maybe somebody's listening that's caught up in just a
Right.
pot addiction. It's like, oh, this is no big deal.
Yeah.
I'm never, like for me, I'm never going to put meth in my own.
Yeah.
Like I'll smoke it, I'll snort it, you know, but I'm never going to shoot it. That's the end all be all.
Yeah.
And I was never going to do it until I was doing it.
Yeah, and I had that same the same thought. Like whenever I heard about people like shooting up and using needles,
Right. Y'all are dirty drug addicts.
Yeah,
That's
I
it.
said they're the worst of the worst. They're the scum of the earth.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Until all of a sudden.
until all of a sudden
Yeah.
it was me, and I ate those words.
So let's fast forward, right? So the progression. Tell me about kind of, everybody talks about this rock bottom moment and their
Yeah.
recovery and their sobriety, the journey. What was transpiring for you when you hit that rock bottom moment and kind of decided that it's time to do something different?
Me personally, rock bottom was always different. Like it was always a new bottom every time that I fell. But one of the biggest ones was when I started putting the needle in my arm. And I remember saying that those people were the worst of the worst and they were the scum of the earth. And next thing you know, I was doing it and I ate those words. And I remember the exact words. God told me, it was like, you remember what you said about, and look at you.
Yeah.
So basically I was no better. But I remember staying with my parents. I was sleeping in the back room. And I was shooting up at the time, and my mom and dad had left. They went somewhere, and they always had gospel music playing in the house. And so I was going to my room. I was in the living room. I was going back there to my room, but every time I would try to go to the room, I would get turned around, and I wouldn't go back there and do my thing. But if you know, like when you shoot up heroin, like you get sick if you don't have it. All that day, I never shot up anything. My parents got home, and I told them what was going on. And she was like, baby, me and your daddy anointed that door handle. So just for that very reason. But not knowing that day, my mom had drove to a bridge, and she stopped at the top of that bridge. And she said I was going to jump off because I could never imagine none of my children going through what you're going through right now.
Yeah.
And to see my mom hurt like that, it just took me to a bottom where it's just like, you know what, I need to get help.
Yeah.
And so I went into a program, and I think that was one of the turning points where like this is it.
Yeah, that's powerful, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we never realize in the middle of it the pain that we're putting our family and the people close to us through, and
Yeah.
especially when we have admiration and respect for, you know,
Right.
like a lot of people misunderstand that individual that's caught up in addiction is like purposely trying to disrespect the family.
Yeah.
Like I may be struggling and my actions may be negatively impacting somebody else.
Yeah.
But like there's still an admiration and respect
Right.
for our parents and our family members. If you grew up in a good home, everybody doesn't have a great relationship, but that can be jolting for sure. And so, I mean, what was that like? Draw us into that a little bit more, man. What was that like realizing where your mom was at, man? And
Man, it just showed me that it hurt her. And it was like, man, I keep putting my family through this hurt. And it almost made me feel like I wasn't good enough. Like I wasn't good enough at all. And it was almost to the point where I wanted to commit suicide.
yeah.
Because, and in my mind, this is how I played it out, is that instead of putting my family through constant hurt, like with the drug using and all that, and if I just kill myself, it'd be one big hurt and it's all over. And that was my thinking back then.
Yeah.
And thinking that it's going to solve everything, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
But it was tough to see my mom, because she blamed it on herself.
Yeah.
And I told her it wasn't her fault. I mean, but
Yeah.
as a parent, you think it's your fault because you raised your child, but all of our parents raised us, but yet we still made bad decisions. But
yeah, that's that part where it's like, as much as you tell a parent or a family member that like they didn't do it, it's not their problem.
Yeah.
It's not their fault. Not that it's not their problem, but like it's like they don't, I mean,
yeah,
as a parent now, I think about that with my kids. Like I watch their lives, and I'm like, man, I hope to do the best I can raising
Right.
them, and that they turn out on the other side of this, and God's been good. I heard somebody say a long time ago, it was in a book on the 3 C's of codependency for parents. I didn't cause it, I can't cure it, and I can't control it. And I think that's the part for family members. It's like, look, you did the best you can.
yeah,
No parent is like dreaming or praying, little Susie's going to become a drug addict.
yeah,
Right. Like I just hope that my kid goes off and starts shooting heroin. Nobody plans for that.
Nobody plans that.
But and I don't think we plan for it either as addicts.
Yeah,
Those aren't on our vision boards, right? It's
No.
like, let me destroy my family relationships and all that. And it really is, there's something deeper we're seeking for.
yeah,
And you talked about that. You talked about the just wanting to be accepted,
yeah,
and just the wanting to be feel like you were part of something. And part of people. And that drove that. It really isn't the drugs.
no,
It's just that part of it.
yeah.
So getting on the other side, man, with your family, freedom, following Jesus, what was that like to see your mom smile again?
Oh man, that was the best feeling in the world. When I was actually in recovery, and they were just so happy, and it was like almost like being a child again, because it was like restoring things that were broken for so many years, because you're detached from everything, and it was I was building the trust back, and I mean it felt great. It felt great, and I don't like when you feel that good. It's almost, and this is another crazy way of thinking, but it almost feels like it's too good to be true.
Right. Yeah.
And that's when we self-sabotage.
Yeah.
But yeah, that feeling is the best in the world, knowing that your family supports you and they're behind you 100%, and they can sleep at night.
Yeah.
They don't have to worry about whether you're going to be in jail or dead. And yeah, that's probably one of the better feelings that I felt.
Yeah, that's good, man. So let's talk about that approval thing for a little bit more, because I think it's man, we may play the game and act like we don't care what anybody thinks. Like it's a great line.
Yeah, it is a great line.
It is good in regards to somebody's, maybe somebody mistreats us or says something off the cuff that doesn't hit us the right way.
Yeah.
I don't care what you think anyways. But then internally,
Yeah.
we think through that a lot. What type of work have you done in kind of shifting your desire for approval, right? So if that was the thing that drove the addiction,
Yeah.
and so how have you remedied that or worked on that a little bit to keep you from being so driven or so impacted by either the approval or lack of approval from other people?
Well, one of my biggest things is like after my dad died, it was a game changer. It changed everything, because I really didn't. Well, let's go back, because when I started following Christ, when I became a follower, I found out everything I needed was right there. Mm-hmm. I felt that emptiness that I had for so many years, it was being filled. And I was like, well, maybe this is what I was searching for this whole time. I mean, it just felt like everything I needed was right there. At the same time, it was like I would want to go back to trying to please people.
Yeah.
I mean, there's even scripture that talks about that, but I always would go back and forth.
Yeah.
And and then until I got to the point where it's like, God is what I need. I mean, no matter what, this is how my life should be for the rest of my life. And who cares what people think? I mean, my mom used to have a saying. She said that they talked about Jesus what makes you so special.
Right.
So
Yeah,
always,
that's good.
yeah. But we do, as people, I feel like what people say about us can make or break us.
Yeah.
I mean, you might call me fat or something like that, and I can act like it doesn't affect me, and I might go home later on, like, man, I must be really fat. It hurts my feelings.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, I don't. But I think the real thing should be is what does God say about us?
Yeah. And that's a hard place to get to. I mean, approval can be an addiction in and of itself.
Yeah.
Searching for the approval of others. And I think about that a lot, like it's preaching and being in front of people all the time and walking away. There's this like fine line of like, okay, I'm preaching the word of God and who cares what anybody else thinks? I'm doing it for God.
Right.
But then on the other side of that, if nobody understands what I'm preaching or nobody connects or gets anything from it, am I really doing my job as a preacher?
Right.
And so there's that balance that we end up walking through of like relationship, like doing what's necessary to build relationship and have, good connections and people thinking well of us.
Yeah.
But also not letting the opinions of others drive us.
Yeah.
And there's a fine line that we have to walk there, because that was a big thing for me. You talk about identity.
Yeah.
And that was the reason I fell into the drug addiction.
Yeah.
And I worked at TC for 13 years. That was the only adult job I ever had out of rehab.
Wow.
And then I left. And I'm telling you, that first 6 months, stepping away from the World of Teen Challenge and going out into the world, trying to figure out who I was again. And I'm 30 couple years old at the time. I've got kids, whole different life. But it was like how much of my identity was wrapped up in what I was doing.
Yep.
And then having to go find myself again.
Yep.
And that was an interesting journey. It was hard to walk through, but
wow.
Ultimately we find ourselves in Christ. And so looking toward the future, man, I mean, what are some of your dreams, your aspirations on the other side of this thing that you and the Lord are working out right now?
Man, it's funny because when I stopped using and I went to recovery programs, it's like I almost thrived in those places, like to a point where it just became like natural to me, like just serving and helping out. And but I always felt like there was a reason that I came back.
Yeah.
And I really feel like the Lord's just calling me to be in ministry, like this kind of ministry.
Yeah.
Far as helping people who has drug addiction.
So what's your favorite part about serving around the guys right now? I mean, when you get to connect with them and whatnot?
Oh man,
Just throw you on the spot.
Oh yeah, I know.
Okay.
I like helping. I really like helping. I like to see the transformation.
Yeah.
And to know that I made a difference in somebody's life. And a lot of times guys don't see it. Like they don't see like holding them accountable for the rules as helping them or just being there to listen to them, because everybody has stuff, and just that is like fulfillment. Like I get more joy out of that than catching a 700-pound tuna.
Right.
I mean, I love fishing, but I think in description.
How many years did you do that?
Commercial fish?
Yeah.
Oh man, basically all my life.
That's
all
awesome.
my life.
I remember you had a shrimp thing stuck in your thumb when you got here.
Yeah, and that's just starting to heal now.
Right,
it was
crazy.
terrible.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, so that is definitely like I feel like being in a ministry like this is what God wants me to do.
That's one of the real positives I think about TC. It's I hear this from a lot of people. Replicating the community elsewhere seems almost impossible.
Yep.
Like most folks will say that, like even whether you love or hate the process, the discipline, all the stuff that goes into being in Teen Challenge.
Yeah.
Most folks I will hear talk about how they had a hard time replicating the same brotherhood and camaraderie that you have within the residential program. That's why it's easy to kind of stay around these environments, because it's like people just connect. Yeah. And you end up finding friendships that you would never expect.
That's right.
Otherwise, and I think that's powerful, man.
You know, one of the biggest things is like being in the recovery world, you run in and meet so many different people. And then like when you see some of the same people that you met in another program, and it's like, man, what are the chances that God has us here right now at the same exact place, at the same exact time? Like, I would never thought that I would be in Mount Jackson.
Right.
Like if you would have told me that 3
Did you
years
even know
ago.
where that was before you came here?
Oh, absolutely
No, okay.
not. I didn't even know it exists.
Yeah.
But it was just like a preacher said the other day. It was like anywhere you are is basically a holy ground.
Yeah.
Like where God has you at is holy ground. We try to make it this great big thing. Like God wants me to go preach in front of millions of people, but it starts right where you're at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good, man.
Yeah.
I think the one thing when we look at God's will for our lives, and I think sometimes we try to like pinpoint, and we want very specific details.
Oh yeah.
You know, and I'll never forget when I left New York Teen Challenge years ago to come to Virginia. Like I wasn't sure whether I was supposed to stay, whether I was supposed to go. I was kind of in the middle. And I'll never forget the preacher sitting down. I'm like, dude, am I leaving God's will by leaving New York?
Yeah.
And he just looked at me and he said, Justin, God's will is really big.
Yeah.
Like the will of God for you is to serve him where you're at.
Right.
And fortunately, a lot of great things happened.
Yeah.
And my life is where it is because we came down here. But like, that's the beauty. Like we get to follow the purpose of the Lord wherever we're at.
Right.
You know, it doesn't have to look a certain way. It doesn't have to feel a certain way. And I think sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves trying to pursue this version of God's will for our lives that may or may not be his will.
Right.
But it's like, let's just make the most of where we're at in the moment.
Right.
And right here we are sitting on a couch in Harrisonburg having a conversation for a YouTube channel.
You know what I mean?
You know? And here's God in the middle of all this.
Yeah.
And man, that's awesome.
And it was just like the thing that happened a few months ago where I had a job offer at another ministry and entailed like everything that I possibly would want. But younger me probably would have took that.
Yeah.
But to sit and wait and pray about it and to hear God says, no, no, just wait, be still.
It's good.
And it's like, man, I really don't want to be still, but it's probably what's best for me.
Yeah.
And
that is one of the biggest struggles. That's stillness piece. And I don't know that it gets easier.
Oh, no.
I still struggle with it. You know, it's like, God, what's next? Or what am I supposed to be doing? Always looking for the next thing instead of just enjoying what's right in front of me.
Do you think we get caught up in what's next versus the waiting room? Like just staying there and waiting and enjoying what's there? Like, that's my biggest problem. It's like I can't really focus on what's in front of me because I'm worried about what's next.
Yeah. That's really good, man.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sitting down and chatting, sharing your story, opening up for folks here online. And, man, thank you guys for watching in. Please, if you have questions, comments, even some snide remarks, you can leave those in the comments below. Thank you for following along. Again, Shenandoah Valley Teen Challenge, we've got links in the description below. If you want to become a monthly supporter, you want to come and join us at the Ben Fuller concert, which is happening on March 6th at Winchester Church of God. That's going to be an incredible night of worship. And again, if you need help, all of the above is down in the description below. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you, Ashley,
thank you for having me.
Having this conversation.
Yes.
God bless.